My father tried to marry me off to a man who killed 2 wives. So I exposed all his secrets. 2 years later he's back claiming I'm mentally ill and begging me to come home. When I was 19 my father told me it was time to join the tradition. I thought he meant cooking, festivals or something harmless that my family had passed down for generations. I was wrong. Our tradition was arranging marriages for daughters, without their consent, often to older men who offered gifts in return. But the man chosen for me wasn't just older, he was dangerous. 2 of his previous wives had died under mysterious circumstances. And when I refused, my father didn't get angry, he got threateningly calm. That was the day I realized my family's tradition wasn't just outdated, it was illegal. And exposing it would cost me my home, and nearly my life. Growing up, I saw my cousins suddenly disappear, only to return months later married and quiet. Their eyes were different. Not sad exactly, but muted, as if someone had gently pressed the dim switch on their spirits. No one talked about why. No one asked questions. Their silence became part of the household air. Always present, never acknowledged. That if a girl spoke up, the elders shut her down with the same line. This is our way. Respect it. There was no room for curiosity in a tradition that depended on ignorance. My father wasn't cruel on the surface. To neighbors he was a charming man who helped fix fences, greeted everyone on the street and handed out fruit during festivals. He worked hard. He laughed easily. But beneath that warm exterior was something else. A man obsessed with appearances and old customs. Someone who believed that the family name mattered more than the family itself. When I turned 19 the energy in the house shifted. The women in the family began acting strangely around me. More watchful. More protective. More resigned. They never said it out loud, but I began to feel like something was being prepared behind closed doors. Something involving me. One night my aunt, normally stern, almost emotionless, slipped me extra food and whispered, barely audible, "Don't trust anyone, not right now." Her voice trembled. That terrified me more than her words. That I brushed it off at first, convincing myself she meant nothing by it. But the unease lingered, settling into my chest like cold air that refused to warm. Then a few days later my father called a family meeting. Everyone sat unnaturally straight as if attending a ceremony. He cleared his throat, looked at me with a mixture of pride and expectation, and said that the time had come to honor tradition. That he explained that my marriage had been arranged since childhood. Refusing would shame the family. That good daughters obey. Then he showed me a picture of the man. The room blurred around the edges as I stared at the photograph. He was in his late 40s. Narrowing his eyes at the camera as if daring anyone to question him. He looked like someone who swallowed up the space around him. Someone used to taking what he wanted. My stomach dropped. Later that night my cousin sent me a link. News articles. 2 dead wives. Both deaths were ruled accidents. But the comment sections were full of people who didn't buy it. I confronted my father the next morning. He didn't deny any of it. He just shrugged and said, "Those are rumors. He pays well. This is how it's always been." And that was the moment the tradition became something else in my mind. A crime. I knew running away wasn't enough. If I disappeared they would drag me back. My father had connections I didn't fully understand, men who owed him favors, uncles who followed orders without asking why. And even if I escaped, I knew what would happen next. They would shift their attention to my younger cousins. The cycle would continue. Another girl would vanish for months and return quiet, dimmed, already married to someone twice her age. I couldn't let that happen. So I decided to gather proof. At first I moved carefully. I asked questions disguised as casual curiosity. Little things like, how did cousin Hannah meet her husband? Or, why did uncle sign those documents last year? I pretended to be interested in family history, traditions and old stories. Most of the elders talked freely when they thought you agreed with them. I began looking through old documents too. Boxes of papers stored in my grandmother's room, envelopes tucked between bookshelves, binders no one touched anymore. I listened at the doors when elders whispered late at night, when they thought the younger ones were asleep. Slowly, painfully, a pattern began to reveal itself. A pattern that had existed for decades, maybe longer. Marriage contracts disguised as family gifts. Unreported payments from wealthy men to certain uncles. False age documents filed with the help of a friend at the office. Girls barely 16 are being listed as 18 on paper. Business deals hidden inside marriages. Land exchanges, debt forgiveness, quiet agreements that benefited only the men. Each generation had done it. One after another. And every girl who vanished came back carrying a silence so heavy it felt like they were afraid the walls themselves would betray them. No one had stopped them. Not once. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of messages. Photos of papers. Voice recordings of whispered conversations. Old letters that hinted at arrangements long forgotten. The more evidence I collected, the more impossible it became to pretend this was just tradition. It wasn't cultural. It wasn't religious. It wasn't normal. It was exploitation. A system disguised as honor. And suddenly my fear didn't matter as much. The truth was bigger than me. Bigger than my father's anger, bigger than the expectations pinned on every girl in the family. Finally, I walked into a local legal aid office with shaking hands and handed over everything. They did not brush it off. They did not smile politely and send me away. They took it seriously. Too seriously. By the time I returned home, 2 unfamiliar cars were parked outside our house, and my father was pacing the yard like a man waiting for bad news he couldn't control. His face was tight, his shoulders stiff, and every few seconds he glanced at the road as if expecting someone to arrive. I didn't go inside. I slipped in through the back door, grabbed the small bag I had hidden weeks earlier, and left through the narrow alley behind our house, quiet, fast, unseen. That was the last day I lived in that house. Investigators started asking questions. Not politely, not quietly, real questions that made people shift in their chairs and avoid eye contact. My father's phone rang non-stop. Sometimes he answered with a calm voice, pretending everything was fine. Other times he shouted into the receiver so loudly the neighbors could hear. The community elders panicked. They held emergency meetings in living rooms and mosques, behind closed curtains, whispering names and timelines. For the first time, the traditions they had defended for generations were under a spotlight they couldn't turn off. Some families denied everything. They acted outraged as if the accusations were personal attacks. Others, more honest or maybe just more tired, quietly admitted bits of truth. Not the whole story but enough to confirm what everyone already knew deep down. This wasn't culture. This wasn't respect. This was exploitation disguised as honor. Within months, several men, including the one I was supposed to marry, were officially under investigation. Rumors flew everywhere. Some said they would be arrested. Others claimed everything would be covered up again like it always had been. Through it all, my father blamed me. He sent messages, calls, paragraph-long texts dripping with guilt and anger. Long emotional voice notes where he rehearsed the same lines over and over. You destroyed our reputation. You humiliated us. You think you know more than your elders. This family will never recover because of you. I never answered. Not once. I was staying with a friend who offered me a spare room. I worked part-time jobs, saved every bit of money I could and tried to rebuild myself piece by piece. Slowly, painfully, I started to breathe again, without fear, without listening for footsteps in the hallway at night. 2 years passed. The investigations slowed like they always do when powerful people start pushing back. Cases dragged on. Some families changed their behavior. Others pretended nothing had happened. But I stayed away. Safer. Quieter. Stronger. Independent in a way that would have made the old version of me unbelievable. I no longer felt guilty for choosing myself. I no longer apologized for surviving. Then one morning while I was getting ready for work, my phone buzzed with a message request. A name I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. My father. Just seeing it made my hands go cold. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. I opened the message. It said, "I need to speak to you. It's urgent." No anger. No accusations. Just urgency. And somehow, that felt more frightening than everything he had said before. I ignored it. For a while the message sat there, unread and unanswered, like a shadow waiting at the edge of my mind. But then more messages came. Longer. More emotional. More desperate. He wrote about missing me. About how the house felt empty without me. About how he wanted to make things right, even though he never admitted doing anything wrong. He kept repeating the same line. Family is family. You belong with us. It sounded less like affection and more like a warning, like he was reminding me of the invisible chain they still believed I was attached to. Then he sent something strange. Something that made every part of me go cold. People are saying you are mentally unstable. I need you to come home so we can help you. Mentally unstable? In 2 years I had heard every insult, every accusation, every attempt to guilt trip me. But never that. At first I thought it was just another manipulation tactic. Another way to pull me back into the house where obedience mattered more than truth. But the more I read that message, the more I realized something far worse. He wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was trying to rewrite the story. If he could convince the community that I was unstable, then everything I exposed, every document, every recording, every testimony, could be dismissed as the ramblings of a troubled girl. He didn't need me to come home to help me. He needed me to lose credibility. Quietly, efficiently, strategically. I started paying attention to the subtle shifts I had ignored before. A cousin is blocking me. An aunt suddenly refused to talk to me. Old neighbors whispering on social media, but deleting their comments quickly. It was like a silent campaign was forming. Not to find the truth but to bury it. Then I realized something else. The timing wasn't accidental. The man I was supposed to marry, the man whose past was stained by 2 dead wives. His case was heading back to court. The prosecutors had asked for more testimonies, more background, more context. If I spoke publicly, if I testified again, if I stood firm, he would have no shield left. My father knew that. The community elders knew that. Everyone who benefited from these marriages knew that. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me discredited. My father's messages became a pattern. Pleading, accusing, threatening, emotional, then calm again. Like he was trying every possible angle to break me. But beneath all the words, the real message was clear. Your truth is dangerous. Come home so we can control it. And for the first time I understood the depth of what I had exposed. Not just a tradition, but an entire system built on silence. I agreed to meet him, but only on neutral ground. A crowded cafe near the transit station, the kind of place where no one could raise their voice without a dozen people turning to stare. I arrived early and sat facing the entrance, my back against the wall, the way you do when you're not sure if someone is coming to reconcile, or to trap you. When he finally walked toward me, I barely recognized him. He looked older. Not in the natural way people age, but in the way someone ages when the truth starts catching up to their lies. His shoulders seemed smaller, his steps slower, his expression almost frightened. He hugged me before I could react. A tight, desperate hold. But I kept my arms at my sides. Not out of cruelty but out of clarity. I wasn't there to comfort him. I was there to hear the truth behind his sudden urgency. He tried to smile. Tried to make jokes. Tried to pretend we were a normal father and daughter meeting after years apart. But his voice kept cracking at the edges, and his hands trembled when he lifted his coffee cup. He said he wanted peace. He said he wanted forgiveness. He said the rumors were growing louder and people were blaming him for raising a rebel. He paused before the word rebel as if waiting to see if I would flinch. I didn't. Then finally he leaned forward, lowered his voice and asked the real question. Can you take back your statements? Just a few. Enough to ease the pressure. There was the truth behind every message, every plea, every attempt to pull me home. Not love. Not regret. Just self-preservation. I felt something settle in me then. A kind of heavy, quiet understanding. I told him no. Calmly, directly, without anger. Just a simple, clean refusal. He blinked, stunned. Then he shifted strategies so fast it almost made me dizzy. You're confused, you know, he said softly. People think you're unstable. They want you home. That sentence. It slid under my skin like ice. It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. A subtle threat wrapped in concern. He didn't want me home. He wanted control. He wanted the old system to keep running smoothly. He wanted daughters obedient, marriages arranged, deals made, silence maintained. He wanted the problem, me, contained. I stood up. He reached for my wrist but pulled back when he noticed people watching. I told him the conversation was over. I was done negotiating with someone who cared more about their reputation than their own child's life. As I walked away, he called after me. Once. Twice. His voice cracked so sharply that a few customers looked up from their tables. But I didn't turn back. Because for the first time I realized something important. I wasn't running anymore. He was. Since that day I've kept my distance. Not out of anger. But out of survival I built my own life piece by piece, slowly, carefully. A job that didn't depend on anyone's approval. Friends who checked in on me because they genuinely cared, not because tradition demanded it. A home that felt safe because every decision inside it was mine. No one watched the calendar, waiting for the right age. No one whispered about good daughters. No one tried to fold my future into an old system that had harmed so many. For the first time my life belonged entirely to me. But distancing myself didn't mean the tradition disappeared. It still lived quietly in certain corners of my community. Whispered about behind closed doors. Masked under phrases like arrangement, agreement, or family duty. The difference was, it wasn't hidden anymore. People were asking questions. Parents were more careful. Teachers were more aware. Some girls had the courage to speak up because they heard about what I had done. Not publicly, not loudly, but quietly. A ripple spreading through still water. And the men who used to move freely, who thought their authority was unquestionable, now hesitated. Because they knew someone had broken the silence once. Which meant someone could break it again. As for my father. Every few months, another message appears in my inbox. Always the same tone. That confusing mix of pity, guilt, and subtle warnings. Hope you're doing well. You should come home. People still talk. They say you're lost. I worry about you. We can fix things. Strange, really. How a man who spent years enforcing silence now can't seem to accept mine. But I'm done being controlled by traditions that harm. Done shrinking myself to fit expectations born from fear and pride. Done apologizing for choosing safety over manipulation. I exposed the truth once. I'll do it again if I have to. Not because I enjoy conflict. But because I've seen what happens when no one speaks. I've seen girls come back married and quiet. I've seen dreams shrink into survival. I've seen bright futures handed away like property. And I refuse to be another silent chapter in a story that has already destroyed too many lives. So I keep my distance. Keep my records. I keep my resolve. Because when people defend a tradition more fiercely than they protect the children within it, that tradition is no longer cultural. It's corrupt. And no family tradition is worth sacrificing girls' lives. Not mine. Not my cousins. Not anyone's. Not ever. I didn't break tradition out of anger. I didn't do it to punish anyone or to prove a point or to rebel for the sake of rebellion. I broke it because nobody else ever had the courage to. Because everyone before me whispered about change but never dared to move toward it. Because girls were taught to endure, not escape. And the silence around our suffering was louder than our voices could ever be. And sometimes, doing the right thing means walking away from the people who taught you the wrong things in the first place. People who raised you with love in one hand and fear in the other. People who didn't realize how much harm tradition can cause when it goes unquestioned. People who claimed they wanted the best for you. But only if the best looked exactly like what they believed. Walking away wasn't an act of betrayal. It was an act of survival. And even now there are moments when I question myself. Moments when I wonder if speaking out was worth the consequences. But every time I hear a girl whisper that she's scared, every time I hear about another quiet engagement, another future being decided without her consent, I remember why I did it. The mystery is never the tradition itself. It's how long it can survive unchecked. How many generations accept it without asking why? How many daughters are expected to sacrifice themselves so the pattern continues? I broke it because someone needed to. Because change always starts with one voice. Even if that voice has to stand alone at first.